right, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you very much. Let's maybe start off with talking a little bit about the topic of what we're actually going to be talking about today. Really what we would like to do is talk a little bit about CNAPP, how we can help companies to identify the right CNAPP solution, what CNAPP actually is, how it came to be, and why it's important to really start thinking about what choices and what questions need to be asked in order to find a good CNAPP partner, right? So today we have, we'll start with the introduction. Maybe if you want to give it a go and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Marcus. So I'm Stan Markov. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Runecast. And maybe you can go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Markus Strauss. I'm the head of product management at Runecast, and we're going to have a really interesting conversation, I think, today, just about all things CNAPP, all things security, cloud native application protection, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Right. So let's get right going and let's get started. I think really, from my perspective, I think one of the interesting things is to just think about what actually is CNAPP and how did we get to having CNAPP. I think is really interesting. So I don't know, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's important to start with that because it's still a relatively new term. It's it stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. And the essential thing I think everybody should remember, and that's always on top of my mind when I think about CNAPP, is that it integrated approach to security and compliance. It's kind of an umbrella term that includes a lot of different things underneath, like cloud security posture management, Kubernetes security posture management, vulnerability assessment, container security, shift left capabilities. So there's a ton of different things that used to be separate. But as we evolved and matured and realized the need of more holistic approach to security and compliance and protecting the whole hybrid cloud and the mix of cloud native and traditional applications, it became apparent that there should be some integrated solution, integrated approach to doing that effectively. So that's how CNAPP came about a couple of years ago, and it became especially popular in 2021, I would say, when Gartner put it in their cloud security hype cycle, and also called it as one of the 4 must-have solutions in cloud security, and something that will continue to grow over the next years. And to me, it makes tons of sense. I mean, everybody should be thinking about this because most of the organizations out there currently already have cloud native applications, and all of them still have traditional applications. Everyone has one or more public clouds that they're using, and a lot of customers, more than 80%, have also on-prem infrastructure. So the whole idea is really to protect and to make compliant your workloads anywhere they are, to secure them. And the only real effective way to do that, if you take integrated approach and take a look at your whole landscape holistically and protect it in an integrated way. So to me, it makes a lot of sense, CNAPP, and I believe we've seen also during 2022 and now in 2023 how its popularity continues to grow, and everyone starts looking on how to get to a CNAPP solution, how they can adopt it, how they can reach to that level of integrated security and compliance.
Yeah, and I think one of the really important points as well is the fact that we tended to look at individual problem use cases individually across the security space. And, you know, when you look at, for example, we're still suffering from skills shortage, right? I mean, this has been a problem in the industry for many years, right? I mean, if I go by ISACA's latest numbers, we're talking about 70% of companies are still battling with skills shortages, right? And I think it does address a larger problem of not having multiple different point products who do not talk to each other or do not interact with each other, all have large learning curves, all require different personnel. So do you think, you know, the automation aspect and the aspect of, you know, the holistic view on security will help with the skills shortage problem as well? Do you think it will start reducing some of that strain for companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand the reason why there's so many point solutions came about because the industry is definitely developing very fast, especially when we talk about software, and it is really difficult, obviously, for everyone to keep up. And typically, the industry invents something like, for example, cloud, or makes containers popular, or Kubernetes, and only later comes the question: well, how do you make this secure? How do you make it compliant? And especially, how do you do it, considering that you're not completely ripping and replacing what you've been doing before, but you're just adding to it. So it's just adding to the complexity. And naturally, there's no human being on earth that knows all of that and how to really do it by themselves and in a manual way. So
it would be great, wouldn't it?
But this is the reality, and this is how it naturally goes. So humans cannot catch up so quickly also to everything, and certainly we need to leverage automation, anything we can do with software to help with that, to assist with that.
Yeah, and you made a very, very interesting point around the additive nature of technology, right? I mean, there's always that thought that, we add new technology in replacement of old technology, and therefore the tech stack should not change, right? But reality does look different, doesn't it? I mean, in most companies, it's very additive. You end up just adding things on top, right?
Yeah, I mean, you remember how when cloud came about, which is quite a few years ago already, and everybody was thinking, well, it's going to replace everything. And I've heard someone say that, think about when we didn't have TV. That was quite a long time ago, but radio was the thing, really. And when TV came about, everybody thought, okay, radio is going to be completely replaced. Okay, radio is still here. Even TV is still here, even though we have internet and streaming and everything else. So the same analogy with the flavors of infrastructure and delivery of the applications, right? So we still have on-prem, we have clouds, we have traditional applications, we have cloud native, and they all have their use cases, and they're here to stay. And I think cloud native application protection platform vendors, it's their duty and responsibility to ensure whatever mix is there in terms of types of workloads, that they have to be holistically protected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think right now we're looking at something like 80% of companies already deploying across multiple clouds, or at least one public cloud, potentially a private cloud, and there's some on-prem in there as well. So to your point, this is here to stay, and the combination of different tech stacks is here to stay, right? So it's very interesting to see how this all starts to now come together in this more holistic approach of the cloud native application protection platform. Maybe let's talk a little bit about what's inside the what you would call CNAPP or CNAPP platform. What should we look for? What are the things that we do need to make sure that are present or are usually part of a cloud-native application protection platform?
There are actually tons of things, and some I would classify them as more like really must-have within CNAPP. Others are more satellite capabilities that could be in the CNAPP or not. But one of the key central ones is cloud security posture management. And let me take a side note here. In general, when we speak about cloud, as you mentioned, it could be public cloud, private cloud. So we call a lot of things cloud now. And since the main intent of CNAPP is to provide integrated and holistic approach to security and compliance, just for the rest of the conversation, I want to mention that when we speak about cloud, it's not just the public cloud providers we're referring to, but in general, public, private cloud, on-prem. So when I mention cloud security posture management, what I mean is security posture management of your private cloud as well, and your on-prem. Also, cloud workload protection platform is another term that was separate, but it is included now under CNAPP. And it's really a way, or the capability of protecting your workloads or your cloud workloads. Then, of course, especially in the last couple of years, as Kubernetes became more and more popular, this has to be included as well. So Kubernetes security posture management is important. It is essential part of the cloud native narrative, and also image scanning and shift left capabilities. Because here we are not aiming at just protecting the runtime and the production environment, but also, as we know in the last couple of years, DevOps and DevSecOps has become really popular, and the way to have more flexible release cycles and just make sense in nowadays dynamic environment. So protecting the workloads even before they go into production, but during the build is also something that is a must-have and should be part of cloud native application
absolutely.
platform.
And I think you made a really valuable and interesting point. When we talk about cloud native application protection, I think the general consensus or the general conversation here is to think about just cloud only, right? Because it has it in the name, right? And we have a tendency to just think about cloud, but it does include a lot of other things as well. It does have to include on-prem, right? Because otherwise we don't really holistically look at solving the problem. But again, we're just compartmentalizing it into cloud and on-prem, right? So I think it's really important to think about this also from the prospect of it has to work on premises, because otherwise you won't be able to make full use of the benefits of a fully integrated, holistic approach of looking at application protection.
Yeah. Even the application protection of the cloud native applications, because you would still have the traditional applications. So that your cloud native applications, some of their components or the whole application would still be speaking to your traditional applications. So you have to look at it as one whole thing in order to even protect just the cloud native application.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really interesting and really important to think about this also from a pure numbers games perspective in terms of the amount of vulnerabilities that we're seeing. I mean, currently I think we have something around 190,000 CVEs that are in existence, and companies have to battle with this every single day, right? And I think we're talking, most companies, around 80% are expecting an increase in that number. And I think historical data really supports that, right? I mean, we've seen an increase in that over every single year over the past 15 years, right? So I think it's really important to think about this, like you said, very holistically in terms of on-premises as well as cloud, and irrespective of what cloud, right? Whether that's a particular public cloud provider or whether that's a private cloud, right? I think we really need to think of this as a much more holistic problem that we want to solve, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And I think, also one of the really, I guess, interesting or also important things is to think about CNAPP in a sense of not only its component parts, but also the benefits that it will provide as a holistic solution. So, I think, you touched on automation already. What are some of the other kind of benefits that you would see come out of a more holistic solution?
And I would even call it, when we speak about components, I would even call it a set of capabilities, because I think one of the important things here for those that are choosing the CNAPP platform is really making sure that these are not really separate components, or especially separate products that are loosely integrated, right? And it's really important that all of these things we're mentioning, like CSPM and CWPP and vulnerability management and so on, CIEM even, they're all not separate, distinct, like we've been having them so far, but really part of one product. Leading to the answer to your question is that one of the benefits is really having one source of truth and really being efficient, going to one place and having not just one team. You might still have different teams under your organization. So you could have a team which is maybe handling more the on-prem environment, some more the cloud. That's quite standard these days, or the DevOps team that's more handling the Kubernetes environment. Maybe you have security and operations teams nowadays everybody needs to have security mindset.
Yes.
And if you're operations team, of course, you need to make sure that the technology you're operating, you're managing, needs to be secure, needs to be securely configured. The developers should be thinking about security as well, and whatever they're building needs to be secure as well. So really having everyone unite in one source of truth and one platform, that would be CNAPP, is bringing great benefits and efficiency also for the organization. So that's one of the really important things that organizations can benefit. Of course, it's obvious that what they should be looking at is being also more cost efficient, especially now as we are in a challenging macroeconomic and geopolitical situation. Everybody should be thinking about how to be more cost efficient and how to consolidate more solutions, more vendors, and decrease the total cost of ownership. Having really the right CNAPP and consolidating maybe 10 or 20 different tools that you've had before, this is definitely going to benefit you immediately from cost efficiency perspective. So that's really another important thing that should be taken into account. There's really quite a lot of things. I should mention also the regulatory compliance standards or requirements that are increasing all the time with every year. And this is potentially can generate more time, efforts, and cost for customers unless they have some automation to take care of that. And having some automated platform that could ensure continuous compliance is extremely important, especially as they have complex hybrid cloud environment.
Yeah, I think also in addition to that, additional efficiencies in terms of, like we talked about earlier on, training times, getting things up and running. We all know, deploying any sort of piece of software across a larger estate takes time, right? In many cases, it requires project time, 3, 6, 9 months. It requires training. It requires dedicated people being, really put aside and, understanding the software. Now you multiply that by 6, 8, 10, 15 different point products. And I think everyone can understand why this becomes a pretty big time sink, right? And I think there is efficiency to be had there as well.
Absolutely.
Because realistically with a single platform, you really end up having only one set of tools that you need to learn, right? Which obviously cuts down on that. And, to your point in terms of total cost of ownership, it definitely reduces the total cost of ownership. But I think it also has efficiency benefits in terms of speed to resolution, right? Mean time to resolution. Because you do not have to compare and contrast various different sets of data, right? Because one of the, I think, bigger challenges in the industry is there is no standard. Yes, we have Yara rules and all sorts of standards that are really good, but it doesn't necessarily apply to the vendors, right? The outputs that vendors provide can vary greatly, right? And then you do need to end up comparing various different data sources, which is not a very efficient way of doing things, right?
And having one source of truth definitely, and the right prioritization is really important. I mean, we've seen it all across with point solutions, for example, that focus just on vulnerability management, where consistently organizations are overwhelmed with how much data they're receiving, how much noise really that could actually have the opposite effect and only confuse them of where should they focus their efforts. So I think when choosing a CNAPP platform, really organizations should be looking at and probably even test it out ideally and see which one is helping them prioritize and really focus their precious time on only what is the most pressing thing. For example, if we're talking specifically about vulnerabilities, maybe which ones are with higher criticality, but also which ones maybe have known exploits somewhere in the wild. And so there are many different elements and data points that could help prioritize. So I would say that certainly not all CNAPP platforms are the same, and I think that's a big part of the discussion today. That there should be a way to distinguish what really works for you, and that's, I think, important part of it is have to see whether it's going to create more noise for you, or if it's really helping you focus on what matters the most to be secure and compliant.
So would you say that, I think focus and noise reduction are two things are really important when you start looking at different CNAPP vendors, right? So what's the level of noise that I'm getting, right? How easy is it for me to cut through that noise and get to the most important part, right? And you made a very interesting point about obviously not all CNAPP platforms are equal, right? And of course, that's what we're trying to help customers with, figuring out what are the questions that we need to ask. But I think additional data points is an interesting topic, right? Because on one side, and I think this is a very fine balance between, you want to make sure that you reduce the noise and not make it too noisy, but there does need to be enrichment of the data, because otherwise you'll just end up listing out things, right? Without any prioritization, right? So I think, to your point, it's really important to have contextual information to the issues or subjects of your concern that you can make informed decisions based on, right? And not just a CV or a CVSS number, because realistically, of course, CVSS scores are really helpful, right? But again, we're looking at a vast number of CVEs when we stick with the vulnerability assessment. It's virtually impossible to make informed decisions on which one out of the 100 critical CVEs that you will find is the most critical one, right? And it's very easy to do that when you only have 2 or 3, right? But as soon as you have 100, 200, 500, it gets really difficult. So do you think we'll see more of that in the future in terms of adding more, what you could say, metadata or additional data to what vendors discover? Do you think there's a trend in terms of adding more additional data points to that?
Yeah, definitely there is a trend, and it is outlined by both customers and analysts that this should be really important. Spending time collecting enough data points on prioritization, because and we can also actually compare even more traditional vendors from before and new vendors. You could even see the difference there, that the new ones are certainly focusing even more on the prioritization part, because essentially you have just a limited amount of time, as organization. So you really need to be able to secure and protect as much as possible with the limited time that you have. So CNAPP platforms should aim, one of the things is, in general, security vendors or any software vendor, in fact, is to bring a lot of value, and one of the biggest values you can bring is save time and money for customers. So,
of course, the chief value when we think about acquiring any sort of security solution, the chief value, first and foremost, most people think of is the efficacy, right? The detection capabilities. But I think across the industry, we have pretty standardized around this, right? I think there are not many differences in terms of the individual efficacies between different vendors. I think, to your point, which is really, really important to think about, is the efficiency of that and how to really prioritize what you get back. Because I think the vulnerability space or the security industry in itself has been around for obviously quite some time. We have matured quite a bit. There are not as big gaps anymore in terms of efficacy than there used to be, right? And that used to be customers' kind of first and foremost way of choosing between vendors was, well, they detect 90%, they detect 80%, and that was an interesting way of looking at this, and certainly helpful, right? But I think today, that's different, right? The efficacy has pretty much balanced out, and it's very hard for customers to make informed decisions. So I think, your point is really interesting to kind of almost lift this up to the next level and start thinking about, okay, but how can I work with this data? You know, what's my work process? What's my workflow? And how can this particular vendor versus another particular vendor help me make this more streamlined, faster, and less time intense? Right?
Exactly. You just have to draw the line and, you know, add everything up and how much time did I spend on this? How much money did I spend? Did I achieve the purpose of securing my environment to the necessary extent? Am I compliant against the standards that I need to be compliant? And then it's a, I guess, easy choice from that moment.
Of course, it becomes very empirical again,
exactly.
right? You know, it becomes very, very black and white, and which is something that is really important. I think when you have to choose, right? It should be free of, I guess, personal or emotional aspects, right? It should be very empirical and very, very binary in that sense. Absolutely. So, what do you think? Some of the trends are going to be when it comes to CNAPP? What are some of the things that we would say companies need to watch out for when they start thinking about choosing CNAPP vendors?
One of the things is really since CNAPP is quite a new category, I would say. I think there is a little bit of a trend with vendors to call their solutions CNAPP when they kind of collect different products and they're maybe not integrated or really loosely integrated and call it a platform, which wouldn't really truly help customers achieve this integrated holistic approach to security.
You're still going to end up with multiple different products, right?
And which would be not really providing you this one source of truth. To your point earlier, it will take a long time to really deploy, to manage. So that's one thing that organizations should really watch out for. What they're really getting. Is it a collection of products or is it one product? And I think moving forward, those CNAPP, the true CNAPP platforms, I mean, they will have to be like one product. This is an inevitable trend that will continue to be. Of course, in the early days of CNAPP, everybody's trying to collect certain things and call it CNAPP, but that cannot continue for too long. The other thing is really as over the years, cloud became popular, and of course, cloud security posture management appeared, and other cloud-only related capabilities and tools. It was natural that some CNAPP vendors literally, and actually, I would say most of them focus on the cloud part only, on the public cloud. I mean, the public cloud providers. But it's becoming obvious that since over 80% of organizations have hybrid cloud scenario, and you add also Kubernetes to the mix, that again, you're solving only part of the problem because your cloud native applications will be speaking probably to your on-prem, to your containers wherever they're deployed. So one trend is really, I think it will be a must of all cloud native application protection platforms to cover the whole use case of the hybrid cloud, which is not really the case at the moment.
And I think that's a really important point, right? Because I don't know about you, but there is virtually no company I've ever spoken to that has been around for any length of time that does not have multiple different deployment options, right? Whether that's, still predominantly on-prem with some aspects of the workloads in the cloud, or vice versa, or a healthy mix, but generally speaking, there's multiple different deployments, right? And to your point, right, if we think of CNAPP as just purely on the cloud, all it does is it fixes part of the problem, and you're still going to be left with another part of your infrastructure that's likely equally important and potentially has a higher attack surface, just because it might be a little bit older, it might be a little bit legacy, right? And you end up with still having two different problems, right? I think it's really important to think of this as not necessarily just of the name cloud native, that implies just the cloud native part, but also the journey from on-prem to the cloud, because I think that's really important. Because I think companies will need to be able to apply the same security rigor, the same compliance standards, the same way of thinking of workloads on premises as well as in the cloud, in order to satisfy auditors, satisfy their own internal audits, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do that when you kind of think of these two areas as completely separate entities, right?
And as mentioned previously, in fact, in your organization, these are not separate because they would, for the most part, communicate between each other, and you could even have some components of the application in the cloud, some components on-prem. So that's really important to look at it as a whole. And you mentioned the journey from on-prem to the cloud. I think what we're seeing these days is a journey backwards, or I would more call it a journey to sanity or to common sense, where realizing that every flavor of infrastructure and workload delivery has its use cases. So things are kind of balancing out a bit. Even we've seen some cloud native companies that started as cloud native now moving fully or partially on-prem. So there are streams going all the ways, and that will be the norm going forward.
I think there's benefits to your use cases for each of those deployments. I think like with any other new technology or new flavor of technology, we tend to get carried away as industry and spend a lot of time and effort trying to ensure that we can make use of that new technology. But as time goes on, we tend to find out that obviously not everything will work well with new technologies. And I mean, we've seen this quite a lot in the industry over the last maybe 2-3 years, where some of those workloads come back, right? Just because that use case is easier fulfilled in a on-premises data center than it is in the cloud, or maybe even more cost efficiently, right? Which is probably
I was going to mention
which is probably the bigger part in that, right? Because cloud is everything is possible. But I think it depends on how deep the wallet is, right? So whereas on-premise you have a little bit more control over that, right? Which I think is really, really important. In terms of like, what are the things when we think about choosing a CNAPP provider? What are the things that you think are like the key points to look out for, right? And we've touched on some of them already, right? But what are the things to kind of like, you got to really watch out for this, or this has to be, kind of part of, a must-have, effectively, right?
And I would mention just a few. One thing is really making sure that it's really one product, that you're not just getting a bundle, a collection of products, and then you're not really achieving the purpose of CNAPP. That's a really important one. The other one is making sure really that it covers your use case. If you are one of the most customers or most organizations that have hybrid cloud situation, or you're planning to have such a situation, you have to make sure that that one product, which is the CNAPP, is also covering your hybrid cloud, your container workloads. It has shift left capabilities as well, so it's not only protecting the runtime. And the third that's becoming actually increasingly important in the last year, especially with the complicated geopolitical situation, is making sure that the deployment is secure and from security and data privacy perspective. What I mean is a lot of the vendors out there, they only offer SaaS deployment, and in many cases you also would not be able to choose the location of the data. So you are sending quite sensitive data outside your organization, and it doesn't have to be this way. So you could also look for maybe vendors or products that could help you retain all the data, either on-prem or maybe in the cloud, but still not going outside your organization. So for increasing number of industries and organizations, this is becoming more and more important. Having the data in the country or even just within their organization, whether in their, for example, AWS or Azure Cloud or in their on-prem. So that's another key ingredient that organizations should look for.
Data sovereignty has been a pretty big topic, and it used to be much more, I think, localized to certain countries and certain areas and certain regions. But I think, to your point, geopolitical changes we had over the last year and a half and 2 years, but also I think general pressure from government and regulations kind of pushes organizations more towards being much more picky around where data resides, and data sovereignty becomes a big topic. Yeah, I think really, like, to your point, this deployment flexibility I think is really important, right? Because part of CNAPP, part of the DNA of Cloud Native Application Protection Platform is the ability to protect workloads in various different places, right? And by its very definition, I think vendors need to be able to move workloads and protect workloads in various different places, right? So location agnostic, or at least multiple deployment options, I think is a really really important point, right?
Yeah, and the whole purpose of CNAPP is to secure and protect your workloads, not to introduce additional security and data privacy problems. So certainly that flexibility and the fact that you're not compromising additional your security and data privacy by deploying a certain type of CNAPP platform is a key thing to watch out for.
Yeah, your security solution should never become another attack vector, right? I mean, that's one of those things where that's a given. Yeah, and I think also in addition to that, I think certain things that, and you've touched on this already, right? Things like make sure that it is one product, right? I think it's really important because it defeats the purpose of a platform. And the whole idea behind cloud native application protection platforms is this holistic view of, single source of truth, one platform, and that implies it is one coherent, monolithic product. Maybe with multiple modules and things like that, but I think companies need to ensure they look very closely to not have 5, 6, 7, 8 different installations, because you're really not solving anything with that. You're just having given the problem a different name, right?
Exactly.
It still stays the same problem, right?
Well, I think we can talk a lot about also additional things that are important, but it's important really to crystallize to these three. I think making sure it's one product, it covers your use case, hybrid cloud, and also last but not least, it's not compromising your security. It's giving you flexibility from data privacy and data security.
No, absolutely, so I think we can even call these kind of like the three key takeaways, right? Really, that you need to make sure it's one product, right? But also I think in addition, one of the things that we need to watch out for is the ability that it fits your use case, right? Because to your point earlier on, you can call, and currently because it's a new area, right? A lot of things are called CNAPP. You really need to look at, does it fit your use cases? Because I think if, as an organization, if you look at this and it only fits 10% of your use cases, you're not solving a problem. You're just adding another tool, right?
Exactly.
And I think as an industry, we need to start thinking about how can we reduce that. And there's even a term for that, tool sprawl, right? And, it's been a problem for a long time. And I think CNAPP is a very good step towards reducing that number of individual tools, right? There was a survey at some point, I can't remember where the survey was, but I think on average enterprise uses, over 12 individual security solutions within their deployment. But that's a lot.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I think CNAPP is really helping reducing that number. But to your point, I think we need to be very mindful of what we consider CNAPP and really start thinking about what are the tick boxes that vendors, including ourselves, need to tick, right, in order to be really considered CNAPP and really offer additional value over just being yet another tool, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, this is great. So maybe let's switch gears a little and talk a little bit about Runecast as well, right? Because of course we've talked very broadly, we've talked very, generally about CNAPP, about the market, and hopefully, anyone who's watching has gotten the ability to learn a little bit about what are the things to watch out for. But of course we, are also in this space. So maybe if you want to talk a little bit about Runecast and, what we do, I think that'd be good as well, yes.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Runecast, I think we take a very smart approach to covering the CNAPP capabilities because we have internal platform we call Runecast AI Knowledge Automation, which is continuously, as we speak, crawling various different sources of data like knowledge bases, vulnerability databases, security guidelines, even blog articles to find information about either vulnerabilities, security compliance standards, or any other misconfigurations that could even cause outages. All of these are typically in human-readable, unstructured text, and they're typically used reactively. So we took a proactive approach. We built this AI platform which is continuously translating those into machine-readable rules. So we have thousands and thousands of rules already and updating them on daily basis. And we use those rules with our patented rules engine to help customers find any misconfigurations that could compromise their security posture, that exposes some vulnerabilities, that exposes some configuration drift, or any other misconfigurations that could cause either security or compliance or even operations or availability problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the key benefits, especially when we think about our AI knowledge automation part, Rika, is the fact that we've set it up in such a way that companies can make use and benefit from AI-driven content, AI-driven rules and checks without the risk of having to expose data to the AI directly or to the internet, right? Which is in many cases connected, right? Because of the fact that we use this internally ourselves, means customers do not have to share their data, right? So I think this is a really interesting point to look at from that perspective, And I think from a capability perspective, we do really cover all areas of your, general security, vulnerability assessment, security compliance workflow, right? And we do on all different deployment options, right? So we do cover everything right there.
Exactly. It was, of course, a journey, but I'm really proud that for some time now we are able to cover any hybrid multi-cloud, so VMware and on-prem, Windows, Linux, if it's physical servers or virtual machines, whether they're deployed on-prem or the cloud. We cover all the popular public cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Kubernetes, any flavor, whether the vanilla Kubernetes or OpenShift or Tanzu or anything like that. And it's all one product. That's something that's pretty uncommon and unique there, but it's something that's a must-have, especially as we're speaking about CNAPP. And also we cover not just analysis of the runtime environment and helping customers not only find the misconfigurations but also remediate them, which is again another big time saver. But also we protect the build process with shift left capabilities and CI/CD integration. So developers and DevOps could really leverage Runecast also in their build process and in their CI/CD pipelines. And you touched on it a bit, but really the way that we use leverage all that information and AI is without compromising the security of customers. In fact, if some customers choose to do that, they can run Runecast even in air-gapped environments. So completely without internet connection. Even if you do have internet connection, Runecast doesn't upload any information outside your organization. You have choice to deploy on-prem or in the cloud. Even if you deploy it in the cloud, it still will not send any data outside your organization, which is extremely important. It gives you all the control. It gives you all the capabilities to protect your workloads anywhere they run, to secure and optimize them. And it does all that without compromising your security and data privacy.
Yep. And I think those are some of the key important points, irrespective of CNAPP or any other set or market or industry, whatever we want to call it. Those are some of the key points I think that we all need to look for in vendors. Of course, I'm biased. We're all biased,
Absolutely
right?
Biased.
But I think it is important for customers and companies to understand that not always yet another solution is the right answer. Really stepping back and looking at what are your workflows, what are your problem use cases, and really look at how can I bring as many of these together in one platform, in one solution set, will help reduce cost, reduce inefficiencies, and really help companies make the most of what they have, right? Both in terms of, soft and hardware resources, but also in terms of human resources, right?
Yeah.
Really making sure you can make have the best use of your investment, right? I think that's really important. So one last thing, where do you think things are going in terms of Runecast and security industry?
I'm very optimistic, just because first of all, the whole reason we started Runecast is really to help customers be more proactive, save time, and solve challenging problems that others are not jumping on because they're too challenging. And security is a place where you will never be bored, and there's always things that new challenges that come up, and that's why I'm really excited of continuing to develop smart solutions to these challenges. We are really one of the pioneers in the CNAPP space, and I believe I'm really proud that we're doing it in the right way, with really delivering the whole purpose of CNAPP, the integrated approach to security and compliance. We have tons of plans for 2023. I'm not sure how much we should share here, but I'm really proud of how we've been able to deliver quality capabilities out there, and there's a lot to look for in 2023.
Absolutely. And I would recommend anyone who's watching or listening, just reach out to us if you want to find out more. And really looking forward as well to 2023 and beyond, just to see how the industry is moving, just to see how CNAPP is moving, and of course to be part of creating really meaningful solutions for customers to not only just solve a point problem, but also really regain some of the efficiency that has been lost in the industry over the last number of years. And I think CNAPP, or the concept of CNAPP, is really going to help the industry kind of regain some of those inefficiencies that we've created, right? So with that, I hope everyone really enjoyed, and I thank you everyone for watching, and thanks, Dan. I hope we had a good chat, and talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. Thanks everyone.